Hey everyone, again, I'm Daniel Siddiqui, and I'm glad to share what I learned from working at startups as a founder and product designer. So, uh, quick about me. I'm currently working as a product designer in Truth. It's a US fintech startup. And I started my journey at design agency Cubeator back in 2016. And since then, I dived into the world of product design, working with everything from mid-sized companies to big corporations and a couple of startups. And after hours, I'm all about side projects. One even got a shout out from Apple, and he at startups. I'm drawn to startups even in with the markets ups and downs because they really foster a sense of ownership in everyone in the team, and that's something I truly value. And I recommend startups to those who are ready for responsibility, ownership, and navigating uncertainty. Being a founding designer, you're going to wear multiple hats and be expected to work long hours, weekends, and more. It's also important to mention that how your startup looks design-wise is super important to getting attention and funding. It's often what customers see first. So cool design can make your product seem awesome, while a bad one can hide a good product, or vice versa. So finding a sweet spot between something that looks good and something that works great is tricky. And that's why I love working in startups. So jumping into mid-sized companies, big companies has challenges. Getting the hand of the product, team, culture, but startups, it's a whole different game. You're dealing with a ton of unknowns, and guess what? Everyone in the same boat. So, uh, in startup product design, you often work with what you got, which means getting creative, doing your homework, and not being afraid to take the first step. One big mistake I made was designing right away without looking into things first. I used to just start designing with the first idea I had, but in early stage company, it's really important to avoid mistakes as much as you can. So it's better to do your research first. This means checking out what competitors are doing, talking to users, looking at data, and seeing what's usual in the industry. Um, Also, I started keeping track of all different designs we made, right where we work on them. This was super helpful when a new designer joined our team. Before he ended up making designs that were similar to ones we had already tried. And by showing him the previous design attempts, he could come up with the new ideas instead of repeating old ones. So the lesson here is if you're the only designer in the team, think ahead what you could do better for new design teammates. Uh, I once had to pick a UI framework library for a project, and for what went for me seemed like a no-brainer choice. Popular, lots of elements, nice, fine UI, a lot of elements. But fast forward a few months, and oops, it looked outdated and clunky, and we ended up tweaking and customizing like crazy. The lesson here, even in the fast-paced startup world, some choices, especially the big ones, like your UI framework library, fonts, programming language, UX behavior, brand, etc., they all need to good think through. Speed is great, but some irreversible decisions need more than a gut check. It's a no-brainer that every designer needs to build the design system. Unless in startups, it's given even more important since you're going to build enormous amount of components, products, and features, but your fonts, colors, and elements will be the same. So comparing to larger companies, design system in startup should be scalable not with a variety of elements, but with their diversity. So development efforts will be reduced. And setting up a consistent design style from the start uh, keeps your design in startup looking unified, and making sure your brand's vibe is future proof. And remember, you're not going to be there forever. So make sure to leave behind some notes or a guide on your design thinking and decisions. This way, the next person can pick it up where you left off, keeping the design game strong and maybe even taking it new cool directions. Um, while working at startups as a designer, you're faced with different types of requests. Besides interfaces, you might also be asked to design the marketing materials, the website, social network, banners, design the logo, find the uh, type, design the animation, illustrations, and so on. And the one lesson I learned is that you need to be honest with yourself and delegate work to others where you're bad at. I don't believe there are people that are good generalists, and I never met one. One's good at branding, others at making landing pages, others at visual design, others at product design. And I'm not saying that you need to find five more designers to your team, uh, but since it's startup, it's better to make some things yourself in the beginning to move forward. But for version 2.0, consider to hire an agency for branding, and if budgets are tight, find a part-time designer who is good at designing websites and marketing materials. So at startup, it's essential to focus on the most impactful features that will drive your North Star metric. While there is always a room for improvements, it's better to tackling the low-hanging fruits. And I want to share something crucial I've learned about being a product designer in a startup. It's all about understanding diminishing returns. So that basically means there comes a point where managing more work or resources doesn't really make our product any better. It's a game changer because it teaches us to focus our energy on what really makes a difference for our users instead of getting lost in the weeds and trying to perfect every little detail. So focusing on the big wins and not worry about the small things, we can keep our startup flexible, make sure we are always adding value where it matters, and stay ahead of innovation. It's all about making smart choices and knowing when good is good enough to make a real impact. Um, the one thing I learned is that startups usually hire outsource agencies to build front end, and outsource front end team might ruin your product quality. So great startups requires great execution, um, meaning the team should collaborate with each other. When front end developers implement your designs, make sure they understand how it should work. Beside that, I also learned that that might be not enough. As in startups, there are no implemented design systems or tokens. All implementations might be different and not correlate with the design. To avoid it and keep everything consistent, Introduce a design review step before pushing to production. Ask engineers to ask you sign off when before release. This might help you get great result on the first iteration. Because further fixes actually not happens in startups. And also make sure to take breaks and be open of what's going on. Understand the stuff happens. People get sick and there will be days when you're not at your best. Knowing how to handle and reduce slowdowns in work is crucial to avoid burnout. It's totally okay if you take your time thinking things through. Rushing to solve problems isn't the way to go. And before, I try to finish my work very quickly. When someone gave product feedback, I jumped into design right away without even researching first. This made the quality of my work lower. And since then, I recognize the importance of quality and being transparent with yourself and with your team, even in the fast-paced startup environment. So, how to choose the right startup? Choosing the right startup to work for is a bit like picking a new adventure. The first thing, go for something you're genuinely excited about. Passion for the product or service is a key because it's going to be a big part of your life. But here's a little inside tip I've learned along the way. The team you're working with even is more crucial than the idea itself. Brilliant idea might get things off the ground, but it's the smart, driven people behind that will navigate you through storms, or pivot when necessary, and push your startup towards success. There are folks who will inspire you, challenge you, and help you grow. And there are the ones who will turn a good idea into something truly groundbreaking. So when you're choosing your next venture, look for a team that's not just talented, but also shares your values, work ethic, and vision for the future. Remember, startups are a marathon, not a sprint, and the right crew makes all the difference. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. So there's a few things here to talk through. And there's the approach of as a founding designer and building designs, and then there's maybe designers joining a startup. So if you're looking at a founder, as a founding designer, what are the complexities of actually moving from a designer to an entrepreneur?
So I had some experience building my own stuff outside the work hours, and I think the designers who found the companies, they usually have great vision of the product and have the vision how it should look like, but they usually have issues with understanding the product market fit. And being a CEO of the startup, it means to think not only about the product quality and the design, but also about the market, the competitor, the industry, and understand your product market fit better than anyone in the team.
Yeah, and then looking at it so that's a designer from an entrepreneurial place, from a scaling company looking to hire their first designer. How do you think they should approach that? You mentioned a few things in terms of fit and navigating storms. How do you think is the best way to approach hiring a designer?
So I think when you hire a first in-house designer, it's challenging for a company because you need to find a person who will have the same culture, same values. So I think it's all about communicating with the designer a lot and maybe even working a few weeks together to understand how the designer works, how he thinks. And the one lesson I learned that it's there is no like magic algorithm to understand if designer will fit the company in the startup. It's all about trying first because working as a designer in the as a first designer in the company, it's hard to predict how as a designer will work in the team. Absolutely, with a new team and with a team who also working in startup with this idea for the first time.
And for you joining and onboarding as a founding designer, what was the biggest challenge to get your head around?
So I guess my biggest challenge was understanding the product and the industry because fintech and especially in the verification industry I'm working at right now is there is a lot of things going on in the market. So my challenge was to understand it, understand the values, understand what should I focus on while working with design. And what I learned is that as a designer, you should communicate a lot in the beginning and ask everyone, CEO, CTO, maybe engineers, uh, to get a different point of views and get a better vision what your startup is doing. Uh, yep.
Great, no, fantastic. And what advice would you give people trying to get into whether if they're trying to evaluate whether they should go into a more of a startup role and leaving let's say they could be working at Google or a large enterprise. It would be a very big step and a risk for a lot of designers. What advice would you give them in weighing up a decision like that?
Yeah, so great question. And I be honest, I don't have the right answer. But my advice is to be honest with yourself and understand, are you ready for the risks? Are you ready to wear multiple hats? Are you ready to work maybe um, our working hours? Sorry, do you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
So yeah, in the startup, you have to be fast. You have to be think through. You have to be ready working with different stakeholders on different projects and tasks. And if you're ready and you're excited about it, if you have a lot of energy and motivation, go ahead and try it. Uh, you won't be hurt. I think I work in the large company and in startups, and I think I very thankful to my experience working in startups because it's teach me a lot of ways that I can also uh, implement working in large companies.
Interesting, yeah. And what has been the biggest benefit? So, can you give a specific example there of something that you've taken from a startup and been able to implement within in an enterprise?
Yeah, I guess I would say that's ownership because when you work in large companies, there are like 1,000 or 10,000 people, right? And you all think that you can't impact the company enough, and you might not have motivation because of that. You just do your job, do what you're told to do, and that's it. But in the startup, um, you have a lot of ownership on what you're doing, and you also have a lot of motivation to work outside of your projects and do something more for your company, because almost all the time you have equity. That means you own the startup in some way, and you want the startup to grow, and it's fun to see how your startup grows because of your decisions made, and this uh, motivates you to do more uh, than you did before.
Great. No, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Daniel, for your time and for an insightful talk. Appreciate it. Your talk will be available online this week for others to tune into as well. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.